Copycat Stitch. I'm Bailey, and this is all of the knitting and craft supplies that I thrifted in the month of August 2025. These are piled in here in no particular order. I didn't thrift this basket recently. I thrifted it a long time ago, but this has sort of become my holding space for when I'm thrifting throughout the month and I'm saving up goodies to show you in my little roundup at the end of the month. So it's overflowing right now, which is a good sign. I might have a hard time reconstructing when and where I found these things because I feel like it's been a little bit of a hectic month, but I will do my best. So first of all, to start with some smaller things that I do remember for sure, this is a tiny little cutting mat, probably meant for quilting. I got it at a garage sale for 50 cents. And that garage sale did have a lot of other quilting supplies out, a lot of pre-cut fabrics and like fat quarters and just a whole mess of those sort of things. Quilting is something that I might be interested at sometime in the future that I don't presently do, and there wasn't a ton there that I thought I would get use out of, but this little guy seemed like it could be useful. I found this sewing pattern at a thrift store for 99 cents. You probably know that I tend to collect sewing supplies and patterns more than I actually tend to use them, but I thought that this skirt has a bunch of variations that they're all different variations that I might wear. It looks pretty simple and classy, and it seemed like a great option for me. At the same thrift store that I got that sewing pattern, I found these. Now, I've never seen this before. This brand, it certainly looks by the label to be an older packaging, maybe 70s. Morit Eagle USA. It is 100% wool. It says containing natural lanolin oils, so I presume that it's minimally treated wool. It is black. It seems almost to be an unspun. It's very lightweight and fluffy. It says 227 grams in one of these balls. I don't know if they're unused. They look to be unused. It does look like an unspun cake in this format, doesn't it? Somebody had handwritten on this label approximately 126 yards. So I guess that's what we have to deal with. There's a good amount of wool here. It's black. Who knows? I don't have a plan for it, but when I spot vintage yarn, I buy it. Also at a thrift store, I found this bundle of zippers. Another notion that I tend to collect a lot. Here, Annie's coming in to join us now. I do use vintage zippers. I feel like I almost never buy zippers new. I have just a habit of picking them up when I find them like this or for a reasonable price for a single zipper in a thrift store or at a garage sale or whatever. So this whole bundle, which has a whole mess of them in there. Let's see if I can count. I think there are 13 zippers in here, and this was $3.99. So I have been making an effort to take more footage when I'm out thrifting in the wild to be able to show you so that we can recount some of what I'm running into, because thrifting is so unique and individualized, obviously, for every person. It's so hard to capture and certainly to replicate. But of course, I want to encourage you to thrift your craft supplies, to thrift your everything. That's what I do, because honestly, it's the most sustainable way to pursue our craft, and it's also the most affordable way to pursue our craft. So that said, some thrift stores have really weird techniques when it comes to packaging their yarn. Now I know that, these stores can have a difficult time maybe unloading some of the supplies. Maybe some things are less desirable or more unusual and less likely to sell. So they have this habit of bundling them into packages so that somebody has to take all of them. For instance, I bought this bundle of yarn that I found at a thrift store because I recognize some of the stuff in the bottom, and obviously some of these things on top might not have interested me, but I had to buy them to get the ones I did want. Sometimes that works out. This was one of maybe 7 or 8 bundles that I found at the thrift store that day, and this is the only one that interested me based on what I could see from the outside. So we're gonna open this up in a minute and look at all the individual yarns that are inside. But I also wanted to point out that some of these thrift stores take it to an extreme. And one particularly deranged thrift store that I went to had some decent yarns. I could see it was a very large bag, much bigger than this one, bundled of craft supplies, and it was ticketed at $19.99. So this is a $20 bag of craft supplies, and I could see a skein of Barocco yarn in it that I thought, oh, I would be interested to purchase that. But you know what I'm not interested in purchasing? The bags of disembodied doll parts that are almost certainly haunted that they bundled in with the yarn. That baffles me. I know that it might be hard to unload doll parts, but I feel like maybe bundling all the doll parts together and all the yarn together might be a better tactic than trying to trick doll people into buying yarn or vice versa. Anyway, I picked this one up. I recognize some of the yarns in here that I've actually used before and that I actually have quantities left over of. So I thought that that might be useful to supplement. So let's crack this baby open. The tag on top, this is a little steep for a grab bag of yarn. It was $7.32. But let's get in here and look at what we've got. All right, this one is one of the ones that I wouldn't have been particularly interested in. I don't know what I'll do with. It's some sort of wholly synthetic chenille fluffy thing. Who knows? I'll throw it in the stash, but not something I would have picked up if I hadn't wanted some of this more desirable stuff. Oh, this is 2 separate balls. This is interesting. I don't know. I've never seen this before. It says Fil Peluche from Fildar. It is wholly synthetic. It says 90% acrylic, 10% polyamide. 50 grams is 93 yards. So I've got 2 balls here. Ooh. And it's kind of an unusual color. It's an extremely warm brown that's almost like orange. Kind of a fun one though. It is a strange construction. It's like, this one has no label. It feels acrylic to me. It's a nicer acrylic, a better quality. It reminds me of, I'm thinking of Lion Brand Hometown, but that's a much thicker yarn. And this is more of a worsted. So I wouldn't be surprised if this was like a product from Lion Brand or Karen or one of those big brands. It is very, very soft for an acrylic, and it'll fit right in my extensive stash of acrylic yarns. Did I need that one? No, but I wanted the stuff at the bottom of the bag. Patton's Lace. This looks like a sort of variegated blue. When I stuck my fingers inside to straighten it out, I think it might be partially used because it's quite hollow in there. It's a sport weight, and in one of these balls, this is an 85-gram ball. There are 498 yards. Doesn't sound like a sport weight to me. That sounds really light. That's like a lace because it's not even 100 grams and it's almost 500 yards. Anyway, this is 80% acrylic, 10% mohair, and 10% wool. And the colorway is porcelain. So nice, pretty fluffy yarn. I'm not sure. I'll have to weigh this one since I suspect that it's a partial skein to see how much I actually have. There's actually a lot of natural fiber in here. I'm surprised. Most of the bags in the store were mostly synthetic. So this also seems like a partial ball. This is 50 grams, what would have been 50 grams in 136 yards. Valley yarns. Don't bite that. It's from Webb's. It's Valley Yarns Haydenville DK, 60% superwash, merino, and 40% acrylic. A nice navy blue. Maybe something to hold with a, stop it, nosy. Maybe something nice to hold with like a scrap of mohair or something and make a hat. Don't eat plastic. Now this one I recognize. Now the label is a little different. This is one of the yarns from the late Knit Crate. And this is Uru Yarn Cotton Basic in the colorway Stardust. And I have made a garment out of this before a few years ago. It's a t-shirt with a sort of lace motif at the top. I made it on vacation and I wore it on a different vacation, so I'm sure I've mentioned it, but it's this sort of purpley cobalt and there is some slight variegation to it, so it gets into some striping. It's quite tonal, but I think I have a quantity. Now, I don't actually remember if I have a quantity of this left over, but I know I used it, so I might have scraps of this to supplement, but I did remember that it's a nice, very soft Pima cotton yarn and that, you know, it's bundled in with the rest. So do I have a choice? Not really. What I really was interested in getting was this one because I have used this one before. This was a Knit Crate yarn. Vitalana Linen Jewel in the colorway Oasis. 50% superwash merino, 30% linen, 20% silk. It's a lovely yarn. I have this in this color as well as the pink color. I've used the blue before, but I have, I think, a skein and a half left over. So having this to supplement means that I can make another garment out of it, which I'm pleased about. I have a few skeins of the pink also that I plan on using to make stuff or something, but this is kind of the main reason that I wanted to buy this. I could obviously see that there was other interesting yarns in there, and that did tip the scales in favor of spending $7.32 on a grab bag of mystery yarns. But between this one and the other Knit Crate yarn, knowing I had quantities of those left over, that this might create a garment quantity out of what I already have in stash, that really sealed the deal for me. Okay, and this also popped out. Now this looks like a mini skein. It's really soft. Definitely some wool in there. I think I'm gonna pop these out. Yeah, these were almost certainly a set of mini skeins. Now there's no information left in this bag, so I don't know where these came from, but these are really soft. They look to be DK weight. I think maybe fingering, maybe I'm not very good at like spotting that offhand. But these really pretty, really soft wool minis that to me look hand-dyed were tucked into the bottom of this bag as well. So that is a great deal also. I'm very pleased with the inclusion of these in there. I guess you would kind of put them this way if you wanted to do a fade. Fun. A different time at a thrift store. The same one that I had found these black Norit unspun at, I came back 2 weeks later and I found one singular ball of this Katja Ingenua. I think the price tag is over the label, so I'm not sure. It's 50 grams, 153 yards, and it's a mohair blend. It's 78% mohair, 13% polyamide, and 9% wool. So mostly synthetic fibers. It was 89 cents for this ball, and there's no way I won't be able to find a use for a single ball of like an off-white mohair. I love holding mohair with things, and I have a bunch of scraps and partial quantities of mohair already, and this will fit right in with the rest of that stash. At a different thrift store, I found this cone of yarn. Now it's super fine. I don't believe it was meant for hand knitting. It's basically a lace weight. And it's this very bright cobalt blue, which I might not have been drawn to, but if you've watched the channel before, you know I found a quantity of cotton yarn at a thrift store about a year ago that was this color, this gorgeous Mako cotton, in this exact same cobalt blue color that I recently knit a cardigan out of. Now, my gauge was off and the cardigan might not fit, and that's still to be determined, but that yarn quantity and that project convinced me that I really do like this color when I didn't realize I really liked this color. This is a huge quantity of yarn. I don't know how much, but it is very thick on this cone. I could easily hold it triple or more to be able to use it or hold it with something else. And it was $2.99 for this. Now there's no information about the fiber content on here. The other yarns that were on cones at the thrift store at the same time all struck me as much more plasticky, so I assume this has some synthetic content, but this one doesn't give me that plasticky feeling, so I believe it's a blend. Easily a garment quantity, and it was $2.99, so I guess we'll see what comes of it. Okay, so now I have a couple more to add. First of all, I was at a flea market over the weekend. I went to visit my friend and we went to the Stormville Flea down in the Hudson Valley of New York. And a little underwhelming of a flea market for all of the hype that it's gotten. Now, I know they only hold it, I think 5 or 6 weekends a year, and this is the second to last weekend that they're gonna hold it, that we went over Labor Day weekend. So we did that because that's just the only time our schedules lined up that we could both go together. I do wonder if you go at the beginning of the year when they're having the spring dates, if it's much bigger and people still have more things to sell. I found that we found a few nice things. It was still nice to visit with my friend and walk around and look, but largely the people that were selling actual antiques and vintage things to me seemed a little overpriced or overblown, or there was stalls that kind of just had junk or unsorted junk, and it was kind of there wasn't much in the middle. You know, I prefer the ones that are maybe not so polished, but they have older things and large quantities of them, and they're just looking to make something from them, as opposed to the people that are trying to turn these antiques for a huge profit, or the people that are just kind of selling crap. I don't want to demean it, because, you know, some things have value to some people. And just because I think it's not great doesn't mean that nothing they have has value. Case in point right here, I found this next purchase at one of those booths. It was just not a great browsing experience, in my opinion, because it was either overpriced, or you were kind of digging through boxes of unsorted items that probably could have been presented better. And it also just makes me uncomfortable when sellers don't put prices on their things. You know, if you're going to run a flea market booth and you just show up with a bunch of boxes and dump a bunch of boxes out and don't price or sort anything, it's discouraging, right? Anyway, at one of those booths when everything was unpriced and unsorted, on our second pass, as we were sort of on our way out of the flea market, I noticed that one of them had a box of jumbled together mixed up knitting needles and notions, and then 2 bags of yarn. I looked through the yarn. I was kind of tempted. There were some that were similar to the blue cone I just showed you, that were very, very fine, unmarked. Those struck me as cotton yarns, but they were really, really fine. They weren't necessarily in colors that I was super drawn to, and they were smaller quantities, so I couldn't possibly hold them triple or anything like that, because there was probably just enough on the cones to hold them single, and I wasn't sure what I could possibly do with it. So I ended up not getting any of the yarn, but I did dig through the box of jumbled up knitting needles, and I pulled out every pair of circular nylons that I could find. I've mentioned before many times, these are my preferred needles. I have modern sets of interchangeables. I use those all the time. I have a lot of fixed circulars. Also, and I do prefer to work on circular needles for everything. I have an extensive collection of straight needles, just that I've inherited or that have come in bundles when I'm purchasing secondhand like this, but I prefer for the weight distribution on the needles to use circulars all the time, and I really, really just enjoy the texture and the tactile experience of working with these vintage nylons. I don't know what it is. They're just very smooth and quiet when you're working with them. They're really quite silent. There's no clicking or scraping sounds for the most part. And it's also just a very smooth feeling when I'm working with them. So I kind of collect them. I pick them up whenever I spot them in the wild for a decent price. Sometimes they're overpriced and I'll pass up, but I have a habit of just collecting them all the time, regardless of the size, even though I feel like at this point I have so many that are size like 6, 7, 8 that I don't need anymore, and I'm pretty sure that's what I bought here. In this case, I dug through that box, picked out every set of nylons I could find out of the mess that were in there, and offered him $2 for this whole bundle, and he took it. So I think, let's look at, we have 3, 8, we have 9 pairs here. The most exciting one to me is this little one, because it's short enough to do a sleeve circumference on. And there is one that was a little thinner than the rest. Here it is. So these are probably duplicates, but like I said, they're a finite resource. If they get worn out or my dog chews on them and I have to throw them out, I've got backups. I truly enjoy these, and for $2, 9 sets of needles is not bad. Okay, everything I have left came from one location, and this was a little confusing. It was a church sale. It was a fundraiser for a food bank, and it was extremely disorganized. I don't think that the church expected the volume of donations that they got. I don't think they had enough volunteers to work through it. And also they didn't have an indoor space. Every other church sale I've been to, they've got, you know, a community center or some sort of space inside the church where they set up tables, and they have like a week or some days ahead of time to sort the things. And even though they're not individually pricing every item, they'll have a table of housewares and everything on this table is $1, or like, you know, all shirts are $1, all pants are $2, that kind of thing. This one, they clearly didn't have the time to do that because it was an outdoor sale. So all these tables were set up outside, some of them under tents, some of them in a sort of garage building. I'm not sure what the function of that building was to the church, if they have vehicles that they would normally park there, but It was roped off with, you know, sort of plastic tape when everybody got there, so nobody would go in early, but there was really no rhyme or reason to it. I got there early thinking I would wait in line, but there was no line. There was just people kind of clustered around the tape waiting for the tape to come down. When it did come down, we went in and it was kind of a free-for-all. Nothing at all was priced. There was some signs that gave an indication, for instance, like small baskets $2, large baskets $5, or the same for artwork. I was like, small ones are $1, medium are $3, and large ones are $5. But everything else was kind of piled on tables and in a really inaccessible way where you kind of felt that if you picked up an item, a bunch more things might fall down and break. It was very precarious and confusing. And also there wasn't really enough space in between the tables for multiple people to shop and pass between each other. So it was just, there was a good selection of things, but at the same time, it was an uncomfortable experience to be bumping into people and maybe tipping things over and kind of feeling like I might break things, and nothing was priced, which always makes me a little nervous. I did pick out a whole bunch of stuff, just thinking it's a church sale. They're not going to overprice it, but I didn't really have any idea. So I had picked out one large basket, and I had a big framed picture that was really pretty that I had left with the cashier so I didn't knock anything over. And I had a tote bag with me, and I had filled up the tote bag and also the large basket that I was carrying. I think I had about 14 things. Most of them were housewares, like candles, and I don't think I found any linens at this one, but you know, just trinkets. And I did find a few craft things. So all of that to say, the pricing is not cut and dry for these things. Everything I have left to show you was included in that bundle. These, I suppose, 3 items were included in the bundle of things with the other 11 housewares. The basket was supposed to be $5, the painting was supposed to be $5, and the cashier just said, how about $15 for everything? All of that to say that I paid $15. 2 of the items were priced at $5, so I guess the 12 small things I bought were all bundled into that $5. So everything I'm about to show you is included that, and it's difficult to price. So I'm just gonna call them each 50 cents because I got about a dozen things for $5. But that's the story. The cashier kind of just seemed overwhelmed by the volume of stuff I had and said, just give me 15 bucks. So one of the first things I grabbed at that sale was this basket. It's a really nice quality basket. I believe it's handmade. I don't know much about making baskets. I believe it is handmade. It says 1998 Karen Frank original. So I guess Karen Frank made this 1998. It's really cute. It's got this movable handle. It's got a different color on the inside. There's this sort of like red and blue lining with the blue and natural color on the outside. Really cute basket, and it's just full of somebody's sewing notions. I haven't really looked through it yet, so there's a box of straight pins, thread, elastic thread, elastic band, snaps, more thread, and a tiny pair of bent scissors, a little needle threader. Oh, more thread that I missed. There's 3 more. There's these little cases that I think they're a little short to be film canisters. I don't know what they were originally meant for, but they're empty. They're just like little, but they're useful for, you know, traveling with notions or what have you. There we go. There's our basket. So a cute basket with a bunch of thread and some basic sewing notions inside. Now, we've discussed this. I don't spin, but in the last episode I showed you that I bought a beginner learn to spin on a drop spindle set at a thrift store, so I guess it's an option in my future. And while I was at this sale, even though they didn't have any fiber craft section, they really didn't have much at all. I didn't see any fabric. I found this basket with the sewing stuff on a table of other home goods, and these 2 drop spindles inexplicably also on a table of home goods. I think they didn't know what they were, but I recognized them and just grabbed them and threw them in the bag. So I guess these were $1/4 a piece, which is pretty good for wooden drop spindles. Will I use them? Yet to be determined, but had to pick them up at that price. And then the only actual craft supplies that they had was a bunch of these sets from Hooks and Needles, which, as I understand it, is a sort of subscription kit where they send you project instructions and the materials to make that project every month. And these had a sticker on top that said $4, but I think that was left from somebody's garage sale where they didn't sell them and then they just donated them to the church. So I've seen these a bunch. I've seen these at a bunch of thrift stores. They had probably 5 or 6 different boxes at this sale. And I don't usually buy them because the types of projects that were in these boxes almost always use more than one color of yarn. I'm probably not going to make the project that's in the box. I'm at the stage of my crafting where I prefer to pair the projects and the yarn and to choose things based on what I really want to do. I'm not still in the sort of experimental stage of making the pattern that is dictated by the materials in the box. So the fact that they all came with like 2 or 3 colors of differently colored yarn meant that they weren't very attractive to me. In retrospect, I had thought they might try to charge me a couple dollars for this box. It did have the sticker that said $4 on it, so I wasn't sure how much they were going to charge. If I had known that they were going to price it so low, I might have bought them all anyway, just because they were natural fiber yarn. Most of them were some sort of cotton or a wool blend. But I chose this one in the end because all 3 of the balls were the same color yarn. Again, that like sort of cobalt blue is surfacing. This is a more periwinkle permutation of the cobalt. I think it's slightly more muted and purpley. And this is a cotton thread. Again, I'm not sure what I would do with this, but I chose this one purely because it was a single color. It was a quantity of a single color. This kit also came with this little bag of charms, and they're all like sewing or knitting themed. I suppose I could just make them into stitch markers pretty easily by sticking them on a light bulb marker. So I guess that doesn't hurt. I don't know that I would have picked this up on its own, but since it came with it, it's kind of a cute inclusion. So let's see what this blue thread was originally intended to make. It looks like each of these boxes has like a beginner, intermediate, and advanced option for what you could do with your thread. That's cute. So the beginner option was a set of coasters. The intermediate option was like a roll-up case to store your hooks and crochet supplies. The advanced option is a table runner in this sort of like star motif. So again, none of those are things that I would choose to make, but now that I've got this, I have the option to make whatever I want. So these they're DK weight. These are 50-gram balls of 100% cotton, and they have 164 yards on each. So I guess I have nearly 500 yards to work with for this in the future. Not bad, especially for what ended up being approximately 50 cents. Yeah, so a pretty successful month of thrifting. Very yarn heavy, which I'm never upset about. As we get into the colder months, I expect that my thrifting might slow down just because I'm no longer finding garage sales and estate sales as frequently. Obviously, there's a lot more secondhand shopping to be had in the warmer months, but I'll keep accumulating things. I might not make these videos on a monthly basis in the colder months because I might not have enough to really talk about. I might have to I might have to wait and bundle 2 months at a time into each video. So we'll see what happens, but I'll keep thrifting. I'm always thrifting, as I encourage you to as well, if you're comfortable and inclined to do so. And speaking of, if you're comfortable and inclined to do so, please subscribe to the channel to check out my future videos. I do a lot of thrifting. I do a lot of knitting. I have a regular knitting podcast. And of course, every year I go to Rhinebeck and film a whole bunch and make a whole bunch of topical videos about Rhinebeck, which is coming up in October. So I hope to see you back here for those and all my other videos. Thanks for sticking around to the end, and I can't wait to see you in the next one. Bye.